welcome back to the 20th Century Dude channel. Today we're going to be showing off my audio cassette collection, and I'd say there's pretty much a fair handful. I'm not going to show off some other stuff. There's plenty of stuff I recorded on there myself as far as mixtapes are concerned, so we're going to show a few of those. The only things I'm going to be showing in my collection are primarily official releases from bands such as Simon and Garfunkel, Beatles, Fleetwood Mac, that kind of thing. So you know what to expect. So for the most part, it's mainly just going to be official studios, official bands, and official releases and whatnot. So like actual albums. And before we begin, this is an 8-track of the Magical Mystery Tour album. And as you can see, we had a bit of an incident lately when I tried to play the Magical Mystery Tour. And I just want to say how grateful I really am that it's not as difficult to fix an audio cassette, because 8 tracks are a pain. So no wonder I gravitate towards regular cassette more. Not that 8-track isn't fine or anything, but, well, I feel like there's a reason we all gravitated towards the audio cassette, and, well, probably because it was just plain better. Starting out, we have the Simon and Garfunkel album, Bridge Over Troubled Water, which I believe is their last one. It was heading into the 70s, and then they split up, and I found this cassette tape. I believe at there's a big flea market every Wednesday during the summer where I live called the Sale Barn, and I believe I picked it up there if I remember correctly. So other than I think I have a vinyl of Simon and Garfunkel, I'm gonna have to check, but this is the only Simon & Garfunkel album I have in any music collection, so I'm going to have to get on it with getting more. I mentioned earlier about mixtapes, and this here is a pre-recorded one of mine. I'm not going to show off too many of these, but this is what they call, I think, a 5-minute tape or a 10-minute tape or something like that. I don't remember. It only holds about 5-ish minutes per side, and then you have to flip it over, play another 5 minutes. So it's almost like, those 45 records, the little ones for releasing music singles and whatnot. So I decided to record some U2 songs on here of some of my, among my favorite U2 songs of all time. We have A Sort of Homecoming, a very underrated piece, and The Unforgettable Fire, my favorite U2 song of all time, from my favorite U2 album of all time. Also one of my favorite songs ever. So, yeah, I actually have a whole box full of these 5-minute tapes, but I have only recorded onto one of them. So, one of these days, I guess if I get super bored, then I'm going to just start recording stuff onto the 5-minute tapes, because, I mean, why not? And continuing on with U2, we have the first of their 90s albums, Achtung Baby. At least that's what I think is pronounced, Achtung. I don't remember. This is, I think, the best of their 90s albums, although I know there's some Zooropa fans out there. And this is when they started to begin their, I guess, experimental phase in the 90s. They did have that, particular U2 sound in the 80s, but that kind of fizzled out and dried up after a while, so they decided to try and go and do something new, while somewhat respecting of what came before. But the 90s is when U2 just really liked to have fun a lot of the time, and this album is a pretty good example of that. Their last album of the 90s, Pop, may have went a bit too electronic, maybe a bit too much in the pop side. But, the 90s wasn't bad for U2, I think. It was a pretty nice decade. And up next we have another pre-recorded album. I think my dad, or maybe it was Mom, who recorded this back in the day. This is actually the album, I think it was Serious Hits or something. So they might have dubbed it over, I don't know. But, This is the album Serious Hits from Phil Collins. I thought I had another Phil Collins tape. Apparently, I don't. So this is from actually a live performance, I think, as well. Because I have the tape upstairs. I think from I think it was Berlin. The live performance was from. I don't remember, but so here's a little dose of Phil Collins. And like Phil Collins, we have a Genesis mixtape. Actually, it's "We Can't Dance," or at least that's according to what this says. Actually got this out of my parents' basement since they don't really listen to this stuff anymore, cassettes anyway. Um, so yeah, we got "I Can't Dance," "No Son of Mine," "Hold on My Heart." So just some famous tracks from the band Genesis when Phil Collins took over, and yeah. Now we're going to mosey on to some Beatles. This is just some live recordings from back in their earlier days that was released as an album later. I don't see, other than like one or two of them, I don't see anything else that would have appeared on any of their albums. Roll Over Beethoven was on their second one with the Beatles, I believe. And I know that, yeah, they did adapt Long Tall Sally, so I want to believe that's on an album somewhere, but other than that, this is just in their early days, before they started releasing official albums and got big. And this is volume 2, so I'm sure there's a volume 1 tape out there somewhere. And up next we have the album Help from the Beatles. This is before Rubber Soul, and Help was also the second film that the Beatles starred in. I have, I guess, what would be called the soundtrack album up on vinyl, but this is the actual album itself, the Help album. Here, this is the 1962 to 1966 album. This is what's now called the Red Album. You know, they have the White Album, the Blue Album, and the Red Album. And this is the Red Album, and this only encompasses stuff from their first album, Please Please Me, up until I think about, I want to say Revolver or Yellow Submarine. That it stops. Yeah, because the last track is Yellow Submarine. So, if you want, this is basically encompasses the first half of the Beatles. So if you like the first half of the Beatles, this is the album for you. Of course, also I mentioned about the Blue Album earlier. I also do have this on vinyl, and this is the Blue Album. This is from 1967. All the way up to 1970 when they eventually split. And thematically, I think it's wise to include The Long and Winding Road as the last track of this album. It encompasses the journey that they had throughout the entire 1960s. Of course, The Long and Winding Road is actually my favorite Beatles song of all time. I know people do hate the little orchestra dub they added to it, and I can understand their complaints, but on the other hand, I don't really see anything that's terribly wrong with it. I'm perfectly fine with it. Makes it, you know, emotionally stirring, so there's that at least. And I'm probably a little more partial to their second half. As far as, you know, the 1960s are concerned, I'm more likely to listen to stuff they released later than stuff they released earlier. As a kid, I probably listened to more of their first stuff, like stuff that would have been from the Red Album, but I think we all know all the musical innovation, most of it anyway, was really here. This is when they just started to make music really just truly something special as far as like recording goes. So there's a lot of good stuff on the Blue Album. This is the Bryan Adams album, Waking Up the Neighbors, and I don't believe I've ever, well, listened to it ever. So I'll have to get on that. Alright, next up, I know I said we had some Fleetwood Mac, so here is the, I think, 1975 album, just called Fleetwood Mac. I think they also call this the White Album, but not be confused with the Beatles one. So there's some familiar Fleetwood Mac tracks on here, like Rhiannon and Over My Head, Landslide, which for whatever reason makes Mom cry every time she listens to it. Say That You Love Me. So there's some good stuff. I believe I have this on vinyl too, although I'll have to check on that because apparently I don't seem to remember anything that I actually own. So even though I catalog all my stuff, apparently I don't actually remember what it is I have. So I need to do a better job with keeping my stuff organized, apparently. And we do have another Fleetwood Mac album. This is Tango in the Night. This, I know the cover here looks confusing because it looks like something you'd record on yourself, but it is the actual album. This is probably my second favorite. I think, obviously we know Rumors is the best album. This is a very, very close second. If Rumors didn't exist, this would be my favorite Fleetwood Mac album, and it's just, I think, a very underrated 80s album. I love Tango in the Night to death, and you know what, I might just even listen to it when I'm done recording and editing the video today, because I love this album. Honestly, forgot I had this. This is the best of Sting. So this is during Sting's solo career when he wasn't with the Police. I have this on CD as well, I believe. And this is from 1984 to 1994. And here we actually have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 on tape. This is an actual thing. I guess they did actually release it on cassette tape, which, oh crap. Oh, I'll have to fix that later. But anyway, if you really think about it, this is kind of the way you're supposed to listen to it almost. Peter Quill listened to the music on cassette, and we have the awesome mix right there. So why not? I'm sure this is even how James Gunn probably listened to it back in the day, other than radio, and I'm gonna have to get a new cover apparently. I don't know why that snapped. Good grief. Oh dear. Well, I'll take care of that later. It's no big deal. We also have the Volume 3 on cassette tape, which I was actually surprised to find at a Walmart. And I guess that means hopefully part one is out there somewhere on tape. I know it has to be. So I'll have to look for it. It's the actual stuff from the movie, and this cover has Groot on it. I'm pretty sure there's like Mantis and Drax and all the other Guardians as well. So it's nice and gold. That's pretty nice. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 offered a pretty interesting take as far as its music selection goes. It sort of ventured beyond the 60s, 70s, and 80s that the first two movies had, and introduced 90s and a little bit 2000s. I think there's even one 2010s track on there. So, yeah, that's an interesting choice for sure. I'm okay with this set of music. I love the music from the first two movies, because that's what I listened for years upon years, and then was waiting for music for 3, so the mixtape would be complete. But I think this selection here it's okay. And again, hopefully I'll be able to find the Volume 1 album somewhere. I'm sure it's floating around somewhere, I would think. And these are some 70s funk mixtapes, and I love funk and soul and disco music from the 1970s. So I made sure to make myself 2 mixtapes of funk, And as you can see, this is actually a Type 2 cassette tape, so that actually is a slightly higher quality and a slight change in, I think, magnetic oxide on the tape itself. And I didn't write any of it down. I probably should have. Um, so it's actually slightly higher quality than you would have on a traditional cassette. So obviously that's why I chose to record onto these the way I did. So this is part 2, and it's a 90-minute tape as well. So I get 3 hours of 70s funk, which I don't know about you. I don't think that's too bad. Okie dokie. Here we have, this is a 1980s dance party, it seems. I picked this up at a Goodwill once. And I got some tracks from New Shoes, Cyndi Lauper, The System. So there's some good dance tracks on here. If you like 80s dance, they might have played this at a party back in the day, but who knows? It's actually from 1993 to release, but I mean it's about 1980s music. This actually I don't know why I grabbed this. Actually, this is a head cleaner slash demagnetizer. If you were one of these people who insisted on getting your tape players, cleaned every once in a while, it says here use every 10 hours of equipment operation. Lower volume level and insert cassette, rewind fully, and then run cassette in play mode until tape stops. Do not rewind, and then remove cassette. So at least you know then what to do. So maybe I'll have to put this in my Walkman later, because, I mean, it's like vinyl, it's like any other tape format. You're going to get dirt every once in a while, so it's just best to clean your stuff. This here I almost completely forgot about. This is actually the indoor drumline tape that my dad had. I think the one year he did indoor drumline in high school. So he was in marching band, I think 3 or 4 years. I forget what he played. He either did bass for 2 years and then did snare for 1 year, or did bass for 1 year and then snare for 2 years. Because I know senior year he actually dropped out of band to do a couple of jobs while he was in high school. But this was from 1991. And yeah, so it's the Indian Valley Indoor Percussion. The school he and Mom would have went to was called Indian Valley, and then merged with Lewistown in I think 2012, and then that was under the Mifflin County banner, and yeah, so this is way before that, and there's some other drum lines in there too. It's not just Indian Valley, although I think they are featured twice. Here we've got some Elvis. I do believe I have this on vinyl as well. This is Elvis's Golden Records. Of course, this is from the cassette is not from 1958. But this is, the album itself is from 1958. Of course, it is digitally remastered, even though it is analog. That's a whole story how that's processed for official releases. But yes, this is the cassette version of Elvis's Golden Records. So it would have been a lot of his big hits in the 1950s. This is another Elvis. This one does not, for whatever reason, have a cover, an outside cover. This is Elvis Presley's Golden Hits, 20 Golden Hits. And it's pretty much same era. It's just, stuff's mixed around a little different, but it's pretty much the same thing. So this is another one I made for myself. This has some synthwave on it, if you know what synthwave is. If you're a fan of the 80s, or you're a fan of, the 2010s sort of comeback of that synth rhythm from the 80s, this is a mixtape I made of that on a little 90-minute cassette tape. And if you want to know how I did that, pretty much I actually recorded it off of Pandora. I let it record for about 2 to 3 hours, and then What I actually did was, go back in Audacity, cut out all the ads or anything that maybe I didn't want mixed in, and then made this 90-minute version. So it makes sense being put on cassette tape too, obviously, because, you're really going to feel nostalgia this time. Up next, we have the new Newsboys album, Step Up to the Microphone. Now, I don't know where everybody is in terms of religious music or not. This was a band I always grew up with. But I myself am sort of very picky, I guess, when it comes to the Christian music label. There's a set of bands I like, and while I get that people like the whole worship format these days, it does seem to be the only form of music that, Christian radio stations and whatnot just crank out. It's not like every band back then had their own distinct flavor, their unique sound, or even Newsboys, and they tried to be at least somewhat different from album to album back in the day. But now everybody just sounds the same, and I find it to be kind of boring. Although maybe if you just like the same old worship stuff, then whatever, you do you. But this is back when music had actual variety. So this is the Step Up to the Microphone album. I had Take Me to Your Later maybe once. I guess I don't anymore for whatever reason. But yeah, so here's at least Step Up to the Microphone. To conclude, we are going to move on with some Michael Jackson. First up, we have the Thriller album from the very early 80s. And this is, I believe, still the biggest selling album of all time. I picked this up at my local thrift store once, which I was honestly surprised to find, being that all they usually had were like religious labels and gospel and all the stuff your great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents would have listened to, but nothing that Gen Z is going to tune into. But surprised to find this. But it's the Thriller album. And typically this would be his best album, but my personal favorite I will actually bring to you next. This here is my personal favorite Michael Jackson album. The Bad album. No, not as in it's terrible, but it's the album Bad because, his song. Duh. This is probably among my favorite albums of all time. I remember this brings me back to my first 2 years in marching band. When I would listen to it those summers just, over and over and over again. And every time I listen to it, that's just what it brings me back to. Those are the kind of feels it gives me. And the CD version, I believe, has one or two added entries to it, but this one just has the normal 10 songs on here. And honestly, I'm surprised that this album hasn't, broken yet, because I do believe it gets a little out of flutter by the time it gets to the last 2 or 3 tracks on the album every time I play it, but spilling stuff apparently. But it does give me the feels to a very, I guess, nostalgic part of my life that's going to be 10 years ago now, and now I feel old. Alright, and up next we have the Michael Jackson album Dangerous. I don't actually remember if this one even works. I don't know. I don't think I really played this one that much, but guess I'll have to play it and find out. Last but not least, we have the first part of the Michael Jackson History album. This is book 1. The book 2 part features more of the stuff from the 1990s, but this is primarily stuff from his 70s, 80s, I believe. I think there's 1 or 2 from the Dangerous album that is from the 90s. I just want to check. Yeah, there's 1 or 2 from the early 90s, but other than that, it's pretty much 70s and 80s. His biggest and best hits on this album. So, just kind of always had this. So, yeah. And otherwise, yeah, that's about all I got today as far as cassette tapes are concerned. So, we do have a pretty pretty good handful, I think. I mean, I did mention earlier that there's many others that are sort of stuff I recorded myself, but obviously I wasn't going to feature those. Um, that would have taken up too much time, and I feel like I would have only needed to show some of the more important entries. But yeah, that's my audio cassette collection. So I think that just about takes care of it as far as my tape stuff is concerned. I don't know when I'll move on to vinyl and CDs. Probably eventually, probably soon. Although considering my what I got in my vinyl, stuff like the 33 and the thirds and 45s and 78s, that's gonna take a while to go through. So maybe I'll just do 78s for one video, 45s for another, and 33s for another video, because there's a whole box of 45s that I can barely fit in the box, and that's just, again, going to take too long to get through. But I'll get around to that eventually, someday. But otherwise, that's all I have for today, so thank you for tuning into the 20th Century Dude, and hope to catch you on the fly. See ya.